The fire has burned down to embers in the tent, glowing with a low and steady heat. The wind outside carries the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a cold breath against the canvas that does not disturb, only reminds. Here, in the quiet hours before dawn, the weight of the crown feels less like gold and more like a stone worn smooth by the river of time. I listen to the breathing of the camp, a rhythmic tide that mirrors the pulse within my own chest. There is no need for words in this stillness, only the acknowledgement of the present moment, the simple fact of being alive while the world sleeps. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken thoughts that guide a life. I am not the emperor in this moment, but a man seeking the center of my own soul, finding peace in the shadow of the legionaries who rest around me. The air inside the tent is thick with the smell of beeswax and the faint, metallic tang of oil lamps that have burned for hours. My hand rests on the rough wool of a blanket, feeling the texture of the weave against my skin. Outside, the darkness is absolute, broken only by the occasional flicker of a torch in the distance, a small and steady light against the vast night. The ground beneath my feet is cool and solid, a constant presence that anchors me to the earth. I remember the days when the sun rose over the hills of the south, painting the olive groves in shades of silver and green. Those mornings were filled with the scent of turpentine and linseed oil, the sharp and clean aroma of a painter at work. The light would shift slowly across the room, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. I watched those shadows for hours, tracing their movements with a quiet mind. The world was full of simple beauties that required no explanation, only observation. The room was a sanctuary for the mind, a place for thought and reflection where the atmosphere was one of profound peace and stillness. Green vines climbed the columns, painted with a soft and naturalistic hand, their leaves seeming to breathe in the still air. A small statue of a philosopher stood in the corner, its face turned toward the light, gazing out at the garden with a calm and steady expression. The stone was cool to the touch and smooth from years of handling, a testament to the many hands that had sought comfort in its presence. The white walls were adorned with simple frescoes depicting scenes of nature and the seasons, their colors muted and earthy, blending seamlessly with the light. The furniture was simple. Wooden tables and comfortable cushions arranged for rest, inviting a slow and deliberate movement. The air smelled faintly of olive oil and dried lavender that hung in bunches from the ceiling, a scent that lingered in the corners of the room. Outside, the garden was silent save for the gentle rustling of cypress trees in the evening breeze, their dark shapes standing as silent sentinels against the twilight sky. The water in the central fountain trickled softly, creating a rhythmic sound that filled the space, a constant and soothing presence in the quiet house. This scene reflected the calm order that I sought to maintain in my own life, a microcosm of the Stoic ideal of inner peace. The architecture was designed to bring harmony between the interior world and the natural landscape, blurring the lines between the built and the wild. Shadows lengthened slowly as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and purple, a daily reminder of the passage of time. The silence of the room offered a moment of respite from the demands of the empire, a space where thought could wander freely without the pressure of immediate action. History often records the weight of empires and the clash of armies, yet it is the quiet moments that define a life. A silver denarius struck in the year 140 AD featured portraits of both Antoninus Pius and his adoptive son on its surfaces, a visual declaration of the dynastic succession and the shared authority within the imperial household. Such objects circulated widely throughout the empire, reinforcing the legitimacy of the adoptive lineage in the minds of the populace. A small piece of metal carrying the weight of a dynasty. The artistic style of the period reflected a return to classical realism, emphasizing the gravity and duty of the imperial office, a style that matched the serious nature of the times. I remember holding such a coin in my hand, feeling the cool metal and the raised image. I was born into the house of the Ani, a family of ancient lineage, yet my earliest memories are not of grand halls, but of the quiet discipline of the home. The air in that Roman house always carried the scent of warm stone and dried lavender, a smell that clung to the woolen tunics and the polished marble floors. My father, Marcus Aurelius, died when I was but a child, leaving me under the care of my mother and my grandfather. It was in that house that I first learned the value of a life lived with purpose. My grandfather, also named Marcus, was a man of great dignity, and his example shaped my early understanding of duty. He walked with a measured step, his hands often resting on the hilt of a sword that was never drawn in anger. As I grew, the Emperor Hadrian took notice of me, calling me Verisimus, the most truthful, a name that would carry me through the years. That nickname was not given lightly, for it reflected the genuine character the child displayed even before he reached his teenage years. My education was rigorous, guided by the finest minds of Rome, yet it never felt like a burden. Diognetus, the painter, was my first tutor, teaching me to observe the world with clarity and to value the simple things over the ornate. He showed me that the truth is often found in the unadorned. Later, I studied under the Stoic teachers, learning to distinguish between what is within my control and what is not. These lessons settled deep within my bones, becoming as natural as breathing. I did not rush to learn these truths, but allowed them to take root slowly, like a tree in rich soil. The boy grew tall and strong while learning the customs of the Roman aristocracy, moving through the city with a grace that belied his youth. He studied under the most distinguished tutors available to the imperial family, men whose wisdom was as vast as the empire they served. These educators taught him rhetoric, grammar, and the complex laws that held the world together. The young Marcus absorbed these lessons with a steady and patient mind, never seeking to outpace his own understanding. He did not rush his education, but allowed knowledge to settle deeply within him, forming a foundation that would never crack. His adoptive father, Antoninus Pius, guided him with a gentle and steady hand, treating the boy as a true son. The emperor prepared him for rule with a patience that was rare in men of power. This relationship shaped the character of the future ruler in profound and lasting ways, teaching him that duty required patience and that power demanded restraint. He observed the daily rituals of the palace with a quiet and observant eye, noting the way light fell across the throne room at midday. The atmosphere of the court was one of order and measured reflection, a stark contrast to the chaos that often ruled the streets below. Marcus Antoninus, as he was later known, carried these lessons into his adulthood without ever forgetting their source. He did not seek the flash of glory, but the quiet strength of virtue, a path that was often lonely, but always true. His development was marked by a consistent and unwavering commitment to learning, a fire that burned steadily through the years. He studied the Stoic philosophy that would later define his public and private life, finding in its teachings a map for the soul. This philosophy taught him to accept fate with grace and to act with justice, even when the world demanded cruelty. The training he received was not merely academic, but deeply moral and spiritual, shaping the very fabric of his being. He learned to control his emotions and to find peace in the midst of chaos, a skill that would serve him well in the wars to come. The influence of his teachers remained with him throughout his long reign, a constant voice in his mind. He often spoke of them with deep gratitude and enduring respect, honoring their memory with his actions. His mind became a fortress of reason, and his heart a vessel of compassion, a rare combination in a ruler. The transition from Marcus Annius Verus to Marcus Aurelius was a slow and deliberate process, a journey of self-discovery that spanned many years of study and reflection. He did not seek to change the world quickly, but to understand it fully, knowing that true change begins within. This understanding formed the basis of his rule and his personal writings, which would outlast the empire itself. The denarius struck in 140 AD captured this moment of transition in metal and stone, showing the face of Antoninus Pius on one side and the young Marcus on the other. This coin was not merely currency, but a symbol of a handover that had been long in the making. It spoke of a future that was being built on the solid ground of the past. The desk stood near the window, scarred by the nibs of many pens and the weight of heavy books. A bronze lamp sat on the corner, its flame flickering softly in the draughtless air, casting long shadows across the floor. The walls were adorned with modest frescoes, depicting scenes of nature and the changing seasons, a reminder of the cycles that govern all things. Outside, the garden offered a view of cypress trees swaying in the breeze, their dark green needles whispering against the sky. The air inside was cool and dry, preserving the ink on the pages and the peace of the scholar's mind. It was in this quiet space that the foundations of his character were laid with care and patience, stone by stone. The boy grew into a young man who was known for his seriousness and his dedication to learning, a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. He did not seek the loud applause of the crowds, but rather the quiet approval of his mentors, finding joy in their nods of recognition. His adoption by Antoninus Pius marked the beginning of his formal preparation for the imperial office, a path that was both a gift and a heavy burden. The transition from Marcus Aurelius, Verus to the future emperor was a gradual process filled with study and reflection, a journey that never truly ended. He learned to balance the demands of public life with the inner life of the mind, a task that required constant vigilance. The legacy of his early education would sustain him through the many challenges he faced as the ruler of Rome, a light in the darkest hours. He succeeded his adoptive father Antoninus Pius as emperor of Rome in the year 161 CE, fulfilling the plans laid out by Emperor Hadrian many years before. The path from a boy named Verus to the emperor known as Marcus Antoninus was one of steady growth and quiet determination, a path walked with eyes wide open. The historical record preserves the memory of his early life as a time of preparation for great responsibility, a time when the seeds of wisdom were sown. The details of his birth and youth remain a testament to the enduring nature of his legacy, a legacy that continues to inspire even now. The light of a late afternoon sun fell softly across the marble floor of the imperial study, painting the room in hues of gold and amber. Dust motes danced in the golden beams that streamed through the high windows, moving with a slow and hypnotic grace. A single scroll lay open on the wooden desk, its edges worn from frequent handling, the paper thin and fragile. The ink on the parchment was dark and fresh, the letters formed with deliberate care, each stroke a testament to a focused mind. A bronze oil lamp sat nearby, unlit and waiting for the coming twilight, its metal cool to the touch. The room smelled faintly of beeswax and dried lavender, a scent that lingered in the air, calming and familiar. Outside, the city of Rome hummed with a distant and muffled activity, a low roar that never truly ceased. Inside, the silence was deep and complete, broken only by the scratch of a stylus on the wax tablet. The walls were adorned with simple frescoes, depicting scenes of nature and the seasons, green vines climbing the columns in painted perfection. A small statue of a philosopher stood in the corner, its face turned toward the light, its expression one of serene contemplation. The stone was cool to the touch and smooth from years of handling, a comfort in times of trouble. It was in this quiet sanctuary that the boy learned to listen to the voice of reason, a voice that spoke clearly amidst the noise of the world. The lessons of his childhood became the pillars of his life, supporting him. The wind outside carries the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a cold breath against the canvas that does not disturb, only reminds. Here in the quiet hours before dawn, the weight of the crown feels less like gold and more like a stone worn smooth by the river of time. I listen to the breathing of the camp, a rhythmic tide that mirrors the pulse within my own chest. There is no need for words in this stillness, only the acknowledgement of the present moment, the simple fact of being alive while the world sleeps. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken thoughts that guide a life. I am not the emperor in this moment, but a man seeking the center of my own soul, finding peace in the shadow of the legionaries who rest around me. The years of preparation stretched out like a long, slow road beneath my feet, paved with the stones of study and the gravel of observation. I remember the house of the Annie, where the light fell softly through the high windows, illuminating the dust that danced in the air. My father, Marcus Aurelius, left this world when I was but a child, and his absence became a quiet space in my heart that I learned to fill with duty. My grandfather, also named Marcus, was a man of great dignity, and his example shaped my early understanding of what it means to serve. He walked with a steady gait, his hands often clasped behind his back, watching the world with eyes that missed nothing. It was in that house that I first learned the value of a life lived with purpose, a lesson that would anchor me when the storms of empire rose up to test my resolve. The Emperor Hadrian took notice of me in those early days, calling me Verissimus, the most truthful, a name that would carry me through the years like a shield. My education was rigorous, guided by the finest minds of Rome, men who taught me to distinguish between what is real and what is merely an illusion of the senses. Diognetus the painter was my first tutor, teaching me to observe the world with clarity and to value the simple things over the ornate. He showed me that the truth is often found in the unadorned, in the rough texture of a wall, or the simple rhythm of a breath. Later, I studied under the Stoic teachers, learning to endure the heat of the sun and the cold of the night with equal grace. They taught me that the mind is a fortress that no enemy can breach if it remains true to its own nature. The transition from student to ruler was not a sudden leap, but a gradual ascent, step by step, through the ranks of responsibility. I felt the weight of the purple cloak before I ever wore it, a burden of expectation that pressed against my shoulders. Antoninus Pius, my adoptive father, was a man of gentle strength, and his reign was a model of stability that I strove to emulate. He ruled with a quiet hand, preferring the safety of peace to the glory of war, and I learned much from his example. When the time came for him to pass the torch, the choice fell upon me, and I accepted it with a heart that was both honored and heavy. The adoption was a legal formality, yet it felt like a sacred bond, a promise to continue the work of a man who had governed with wisdom and kindness. I was one of the 5 good emperors, a title that carries a certain weight in the annals of history. Though I cared little for such accolades in the moment, the dynasty of the Nerva, Antonines, was a chain of virtuous men, each linked to the next by the choice of ability rather than the accident of birth. This system allowed Rome to flourish, for it placed the most capable hands upon the reins of power. I shared the throne with Lucius Verus in the early years, a partnership that required patience and a willingness to share the load. We were 2 pillars holding up the roof of the empire, and though our temperaments differed, our purpose remained the same. The world outside the palace walls was a place of constant motion, with armies marching and cities rising and falling. I sought to bring order to this chaos, to impose the calm of philosophy upon the turbulent currents of politics. The choice of my son Commodus as my heir was a decision that weighed heavily on my mind, a choice made in the shadow of tradition and the hope of continuity. I saw him as a child, full of life and potential, and I wished for him to inherit the throne with all its responsibilities. Yet, the path of hereditary rule is fraught with danger, and the fragility of political stability became clear in the years that followed. The empire lost a leader who governed by reason and self-discipline, in favor of one who would rule by whim and excess. This transition of power was smooth in procedure but disastrous in outcome, altering the course of Roman history in ways that I could only dimly foresee. The silence of my inner life provided a refuge from the noise of the world, a place where I could retreat when the demands of the state became too great. I ruled with a kindness that extended even to my own kin and family members, believing that love and duty were not mutually exclusive. The legacy of my personal life is found in my writings and my actions, in the quiet moments of reflection that punctuated the days of war and governance. My devotion to philosophy defined my character, and my approach to the imperial office, a commitment that never wavered even in the face of great adversity. The historical record preserves my image as a ruler who sought truth above all else, a man who walked the path of reason until the very end. My life ended in 180 CE, closing a chapter of relative peace and philosophical governance that would never be repeated in quite the same way. The empire moved forward, but the shadow of my wisdom lingered over the turbulent centuries to come, a faint light in the darkness of the future. The decision to name Commodus as heir remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of political stability, a lesson that history would repeat many times over. Even in death, the philosopher king offered a lesson in the importance of wise succession and the dangers of hereditary rule. The world changed after my passing, but my words remained a beacon for those seeking clarity in dark times. The statue in Rome continues to watch over the city, a stone and bronze guardian of a bygone era. The quiet rhythm of my life gave way to the noise of a changing empire, yet my voice endured in the pages of my journals. The final years were a testament to the power of a mind trained in philosophy to withstand the pressures of power. The end of my rule was the beginning of a long decline. Yet my personal philosophy survived the fall of the dynasty. The bronze horse and rider stand as a silent testament to a reign defined by introspection and duty, a symbol of what could have been. A bronze equestrian statue stands in the Piazza del Campidoglio, the metal dark with age and the patina of centuries. The horse lifts one hoof in a gesture of calm motion, frozen in time yet seeming ready to step forward. The figure of the rider sits tall, one hand raised in a sign of clemency that speaks of a gentle authority. The surface of the bronze is rough in places, worn by the touch of wind and rain, yet the face remains composed and dignified. Sunlight plays across the curves of the armor, highlighting the folds of the cloak that drapes over the shoulders. The base is stone, solid and unmoving, anchoring the figure against the shifting tides of the city. Birds sometimes land on the horse's head, their small feet making no sound on the cold metal. The silence around the statue is deep, broken only by the distant murmur of the crowd and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. It is a place of stillness in a busy world, a reminder of the man who once walked these streets with a quiet heart. The texture of the metal contrasts with the smooth stone of the base, a study in the durability of memory. No words are spoken here, yet the statue tells a story of duty and reflection that has lasted for generations. The raised hand remains a gesture of peace, a symbol of the philosophy that guided the ruler who once sat upon this horse. The empire would struggle to find leader of my caliber again for many generations, a fact that brings a sense of sadness to the heart. The story of my late life is one of a duty fulfilled, and wisdom preserved against the tides of time. The bronze figure in the square remains a symbol of the philosopher who ruled an empire with a quiet heart. The end of my life was not a defeat, but a transition, passing the torch to a less worthy hand. The history of Rome would never be the same after. The wind outside the tent carries the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a cold breath that does not disturb, only reminds. Here, in the quiet hours before the dawn, the weight of the crown feels less like gold and more like a stone worn smooth by the river of time. I listen to the breathing of the camp, a rhythmic tide that mirrors the pulse within my own chest. There is no need for words in this stillness, only the acknowledgement of the present moment, the simple fact of being alive while the world sleeps. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken thoughts that guide a life. I am not the emperor in this moment, but a man seeking the center of my own soul, finding peace in the shadow of the legionaries who rest around me. The Marcomannic Wars were the great test of these years, a conflict that stretched across the northern frontiers and defined the later part of my reign. We faced the Marcomanni, the Sarmatians, the Vandals, and the Quadi, all while a terrible pestilence swept through the legions and the cities. The air in the camps grew thick with the smell of sickness and the metallic tang of fear, yet we held the line. I remember the cold mud of the Danube, the way it clung to the boots of the soldiers, heavy and unyielding. The tribes across the river were led by men like Balamar and Ariogazus, who brought a fury that surpassed any memory of war from before. Their attacks were relentless, a storm of spears and shields that threatened to break the barrier we had built over centuries. We fought with valor and with a success that was hard won. But the victory was not measured in new lands. The territorial outcome was a return to the status quo ante bellum, meaning no permanent lands were gained from the conflict. The Roman plans to annex Sarmatia and Marcomannia were abandoned following the long struggle, leaving the borders largely unchanged. This was a war that surpassed any in the memory of man, waged with both valor and a heavy heart. The triumph celebrating these victories was a grand affair in Rome, a spectacle of gold and laurels that dazzled the eyes of the crowd. Yet, I ran on foot in the circus by the side of the triumphal car in which my son was seated, a simple act that demonstrated my humility and my rejection of excessive personal glorification. The architectural record of my reign is less defined by new construction than by the maintenance of existing structures. There are no great new temples or massive walls built in this time, for the focus remained on the defense of the frontier and the quiet work of philosophy. The stability of the empire was maintained through administrative continuity rather than monumental building projects. The lack of recorded urban planning changes does not imply a lack of governance, but rather a prioritization of other imperial duties. The Emperor Lucius Verus, served as a crucial collaborator during the early years of my rule, though he possessed vices that often offended my nature. I concealed and defended them with remarkable patience, for the partnership was vital to the peace of the realm. When Verus died, I deified him and established a college of Antonine priests in his honor, honoring the bond we shared despite our differences. Rumors later circulated that I murdered my Emperor Verus, using poison or by having a physician bleed him unseasonably. Yet these claims remain uncertain and fade into the noise of history. The military campaigns of the Marcomannic Wars tested the resolve of the imperial partnership, and I acted as a principal commander. In these conflicts against the Germanic tribes, the Quadi tribe was led by Ariogassus during the wars, adding another layer of complexity to the military situation. As we moved through the forests and the marshes, despite these external pressures, the relationship between us remained intact until the end of Verus' life, a testament to the strength of our shared duty. My son Commodus would eventually succeed me, during whose reign plague outbreaks also occurred, marking a departure from the adoptive model that had governed the previous generations of emperors. The philosophical work known as Meditations stands as a testament to the inner life of Marcus Aurelius, revealing a man who sought wisdom through his relationships with teachers, friends, and even his rivals. The quiet stone of a Roman villa in the 2nd century held the weight of these complex bonds within its warm walls. Sunlight filtered through the high clerestory windows, casting long, slow shadows across the polished marble floor. A bronze lamp sat on a low table, its flame flickering gently in the still air of the room. The walls were adorned with faded frescoes depicting scenes of harvest and peace, untouched by the chaos of the frontier. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, moving with a deliberate slowness that matched the rhythm of the empire. A woven rug covered the stone floor, softening the sound of footsteps that rarely disturbed the silence. The air smelled faintly of beeswax and dried lavender, a scent that lingered in the corners of the room. Outside, the world moved on, but in this space, time seemed to hold its breath. The legions required about 3,000 calories per day to sustain their physical exertion, a dietary need that shaped the supply lines stretching across the European landscape. This constant flow of grain and meat was the lifeblood of the frontier, a river of sustenance that fed the steel of the sword. The Marcomannic Wars tested the administrative capacity of the imperial government during these difficult years, pushing the systems of Rome to their limits. Despite these military struggles, the internal governance of the empire remained focused on justice and order, a principle that never wavered. The Antonine Plague also emerged during this period and affected the population of Rome significantly, spreading through the legions and the cities with a terrible speed. This disease caused widespread mortality and social disruption, leaving a silence in the streets that was louder than any war drum. The plague marked a turning point as the empire began to face more severe internal and external threats, a shadow that would lengthen in the years to come. The fire of 192 AD occurred after my death, but highlighted the fragility of the capital city, causing extensive damage to the center of Rome. This event required significant reconstruction efforts. Yet the legacy of my reign remained one of philosophical reflection and stoic acceptance of fate. I wrote my personal thoughts in a work that would later be known as Meditations, a collection of reflections on the nature of duty, the transience of life, and the unity of humanity. My rule represented the culmination of a dynasty that had prioritized the welfare of the state, a final flowering of the 5 good emperors. The transition of power to my son Commodus eventually ended this era, marking the beginning of a more turbulent period in Roman imperial history. The stability of the previous decades gave way to civil wars and political instability, but the memory of Marcus Aurelius endured as a symbol of the philosopher king. My life illustrated the possibility of combining military command with deep intellectual pursuit, a balance that was never easy but always necessary. The historical record preserves my image as a ruler who sought wisdom above all else, a man who found peace in the midst of the storm. The visual record of the column continues to provide scholars with a rich source of information regarding Roman military tactics and iconography, showing the battles fought and the enemies faced. The combination of literary and visual evidence creates a comprehensive picture of an emperor who sought wisdom amidst the demands of power. The silence of some historical texts regarding specific works or architectural feats serves only to highlight the enduring nature of what remains. The denarius, the column, and the diary together form a triad of evidence that defines the era, a testament to a life lived in service. A quiet room in a Roman villa during the reign of Marcus Aurelius would have been filled with the soft light of oil lamps burning in bronze holders. The walls were adorned with frescoes depicting scenes of nature and myth, painted in muted earth tones of ochre and terracotta. A wooden desk stood near the window, its surface worn smooth by the hands of scribes and philosophers who worked there. Scrolls of papyrus lay neatly stacked in a cedar chest, their edges frayed from frequent handling. The air smelled faintly of beeswax, dried lavender, and the ink used to record the thoughts of the emperor. Outside the window, the garden was silent, save for the gentle rustling of olive leaves in the evening breeze. The stone floor was cool underfoot, polished to a soft sheen by centuries of careful maintenance. In this stillness, the weight of the empire felt distant, replaced by the quiet rhythm of breathing and the turning of pages. The silence of the room offered a sanctuary from the noise of the legions and the demands of the court. It was a space where the mind could wander freely, unburdened by the cares of state. The flickering light cast long shadows that danced slowly across the walls, marking the passage of time without urgency. This atmosphere of calm permeated the private life of the emperor, allowing for the deep reflection that produced the meditations. The room remained a place of order and tranquility, a microcosm of the Stoic ideal of inner peace. The objects within it, from the simple inkwell to the heavy marble column outside, spoke of a life dedicated to duty and the search for truth. The wars were fought, the borders held, and the peace was kept not by the glory of conquest, but by the quiet strength of endurance. The wind outside the tent still carries the scent of damp earth, and the fire has burned down to embers. The world sleeps, and I am content to rest in the knowledge that the work was done. The stars above are the same stars that watched over the legions, and they shine with a steady, unchanging light. There is no need for more words, for the silence speaks the truth of all that was and all that will be. The journey is complete, the story is told, and the soul finds its rest in the quiet of the night. The fire has burned down to embers in the tent. The wind outside carries the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a cold breath against the canvas that does not disturb, only reminds. Here, in the quiet hours before dawn, the weight of the crown feels less like gold and more like a stone worn smooth by the river of time. I listen to the breathing of the camp, a rhythmic tide that mirrors the pulse within my own chest. There is no need for words in this stillness, only the acknowledgement of the present moment. The simple fact of being alive while the world sleeps. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken thoughts that guide a life. I am not the emperor in this moment, but a man seeking the center of my own soul, finding peace in the shadow of the legionaries who rest around me. My earliest days were spent under the watchful eyes of those who loved me. My mother and my grandfather, in a house that smelled of old wood and polished stone. I grew tall and strong, my body learning the rhythms of the Roman aristocracy before my mind could fully grasp them. The tutors came from the finest schools, men who spoke with the gravity of scholars and the patience of gardeners tending a rare bloom. They taught me the complex laws of the empire, the flow of rhetoric, and the structure of grammar. Yet I did not rush to swallow these lessons. I let the knowledge settle slowly, like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, finding their place within the quiet chambers of my memory. my adoptive father, Antoninus Pius, guided me with a hand that was both firm and gentle, treating me not as a political tool, but as a true son. He showed me that power was a heavy cloak that required strength to wear, yet restraint to keep from crushing the wearer. I watched the daily rituals of the palace with eyes that sought the pattern beneath the pageantry, seeing the order that held the chaos of the world at bay. This training was not merely academic, but deeply moral, shaping the character of the boy who would one day rule. I learned that duty required patience, and that virtue was found in the quiet moments between the loud demands of state. The transition from Marcus Aurelius, Verus, to the man who would be known as Marcus Aurelius was a slow and deliberate journey, a path walked step by step over many years of study and reflection. I did not seek to change the world in a single day, but to understand it fully, piece by piece, until the picture was clear. The room where I practiced these thoughts was a sanctuary of simple beauty, designed to bring harmony between the interior world and the natural landscape. White walls stood around me, unadorned save for the soft shadows that lengthened as the sun dipped below the horizon. A small statue of a philosopher stood on a pedestal near the window, its stone gaze fixed on the garden beyond, where cypress trees rustled in the evening breeze. The air inside smelled faintly of olive oil and dried lavender that hung in bunches from the ceiling, their scent mingling with the coolness of the stone floor. Outside, the water in the central fountain trickled softly, creating a rhythmic sound that filled the space and washed away the noise of the day. The texture of the walls felt cool and solid under the touch of a wandering hand, a reminder of the stability that philosophy offered amidst the shifting tides of fate. A lamp flickered once but remained steady, a small beacon of light in the gathering darkness, casting long shadows across the simple wooden tables and comfortable cushions arranged for rest. This atmosphere mirrored the internal state I strove to achieve, a mind that could remain calm while the empire faced the storms of war and the weight of expectation. The silence of the room offered a moment of respite, a space where thought could wander freely without the pressure of immediate action. It was a place where the soul could rest, and where the lessons of the Stoics could take root and grow deep and strong. The philosophy I embraced was not a set of rules to be memorized, but a way of living that taught me to accept fate with grace and to act with justice in every moment. I learned to distinguish between what I could control and what I could not, finding peace in the acceptance of the latter and responsibility in the former. The training I received was not merely academic but deeply moral and spiritual, shaping the way I saw the world and my place within it. I learned to control my emotions and to find peace in the midst of chaos. to see the common thread that connected all human beings regardless of their station. The influence of my teachers remained with me throughout my long reign, and I often spoke of them with deep gratitude and enduring respect. My mind became a fortress of reason, and my heart a vessel of compassion, guided by the principles that had been instilled in me since childhood. I studied the writings of Chrysippus, the great Stoic scholar from the 3rd century before my time, whose words provided a framework for understanding the nature of the universe and the role of the individual within it. His teachings helped me to see that every event, no matter how difficult, was part of a greater whole, a natural order that could not be broken by human will. This understanding formed the basis of my rule and my personal writings, a testament to the power of reason to guide even the most powerful man through the darkest of times. A silver denarius struck in the year 140 AD captured this moment of transition in metal and stone, showing the face of Antoninus Pius on one side and the young Marcus on the other. This coinage served as a visual declaration of the dynastic succession and the shared authority within the imperial household, circulating widely throughout the empire to reinforce the legitimacy of the adoptive lineage. The artistic style of the period reflected a return to classical realism, emphasizing the gravity and duty of the imperial office. And the young philosopher was presented as a stable and prepared successor to the throne. Such objects were not merely currency, but symbols of a new era, where wisdom would guide the helm of state, and philosophy would shape the policies of the empire. The image of the young emperor on the coin was a promise of the man he would become, a ruler who would seek to live according to reason and virtue, even in the face of overwhelming odds. This numismatic evidence suggests a deliberate effort to present the future ruler as a man of thought and action, capable of bearing the weight of the crown with both strength and humility. The most enduring literary legacy of Marcus Aurelius remains the philosophical work known as Meditations, a text that was not originally intended for publication, but served as a private diary during his military campaigns. He wrote at least part of his famous work during the last years of his military campaigns, using the quiet moments of the night to record his thoughts and reflections on the nature of life, death, and duty. The volume functioned as a Stoic philosophy guide that he consulted to maintain his moral fortitude amidst the chaos of war, a personal conversation with the self that provided clarity and direction in times of confusion. These pages were filled with reminders to remain just, to accept the will of the universe, and to find peace in the simple act of being. The critical reception of his life has varied over the centuries, yet his reputation as a philosopher king remains intact, a testament to the enduring power of his words and the depth of his wisdom. Scholars continue to debate the extent of his influence on the subsequent political and cultural trajectory of the empire, some arguing that his reign was the last true moment of stability before the long decline of the 3rd century, while others suggest that the challenges he faced were inevitable and that his governance was remarkably effective given the circumstances. The historical record remains incomplete in some areas, but the core narrative of his life is well established. A story of a man who sought to live according to the highest ideals of his time. The statue that stands today in the heart of the city is a testament to the endurance of his legacy. A bronze figure that has survived the fall of the Roman Empire and the destruction of many other monuments throughout the ages. The patina of the metal has turned a deep green over the centuries, blending with the warm tones of the surrounding stone architecture. And the figure of the horse raises one foreleg in a gesture of controlled movement that suggests both power and restraint. Visitors walk slowly around the base of the monument and observe the intricate details of the horse's musculature and the emperor's draped cloak, their eyes tracing the lines of a life dedicated to reason and virtue. The statue was mistakenly believed for a long time to depict Constantine the Great, which helped preserve it from melting down for metal, allowing the image of Marcus Aurelius to endure when other representations of him might have been lost forever. The silence of the square allows the viewer to contemplate the weight of history that rests upon this singular, surviving artifact, a silent witness to the passage of time and the enduring nature of the human spirit. The legacy of his written thoughts continues to influence Western philosophy long after his death, providing a unique window into the mind of a ruler who sought to live according to reason and virtue. Modern readers find comfort in his reflections on duty, mortality, and the nature of the universe, finding in his words a guide for their own lives and a reminder of the power of the human mind to transcend the limitations of the body. The room where I spent so many hours of reflection was a mirror of the soul, quiet and ordered and full of light, adorned with simple frescoes depicting scenes of nature and the seasons. Green vines climbed the columns, painted with a soft and naturalistic hand, their leaves seeming to move in the gentle breeze that drifted through the open windows. A small statue of a philosopher stood in the corner, its face turned toward the fire has burned down to embers in the tent. The wind outside carries the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a cold breath against the canvas that does not disturb, only reminds. Here, in the quiet hours before dawn, the weight of the crown feels less like gold and more like a stone worn smooth by the river of time. I listen to the breathing of the camp, a rhythmic tide that mirrors the pulse within my own chest. There is no need for words in this stillness, only the acknowledgement of the present moment, the simple fact of being alive while the world sleeps. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken thoughts that guide a life. I am not the emperor in this moment, but a man seeking the center of my own soul, finding peace in the shadow of the legionaries who rest around me. The long roads stretched out like ribbons of dust and stone across the rolling hills of the north. Every mile demanded a careful calculation of grain and water for the men who marched beside me. A single soldier needed 3,000 calories of food each day just to keep his legs moving forward. This simple number shaped the way we moved, dictating the length of our supply lines that wound through forests and over mountains. The Marcomannic Wars tested the administrative strength of the empire in ways that no battle ever could. While swords clashed on the frontier, the quiet work of governance continued in the cities behind the lines. Justice and order remained the primary focus, even as the world seemed to tremble with the weight of war. The plague arrived during these difficult years, spreading through the legions and the cities with a quiet, terrible speed. It moved through the ranks like a shadow, taking life without distinction of rank or station. The disease caused a widespread mortality that altered the social fabric of Rome itself. This sickness marked a turning point where the empire began to face threats from within and without with equal intensity. The fire of 192 AD occurred after my death, but it highlighted the fragility of the capital city. That event caused extensive damage to the center of Rome and required significant reconstruction efforts. The legacy of my reign remained one of philosophical reflection and stoic acceptance of fate. I wrote my personal thoughts in a work that would later be known as Meditations. These writings reflected on the nature of duty, the transience of life, and the unity of humanity. My rule represented the culmination of a dynasty that had prioritized the welfare of the state. The transition of power to my son Commodus eventually ended the era of the 5 good emperors. This shift marked the beginning of a more turbulent period in Roman imperial history. The stability of the previous decades gave way to civil wars and political instability. Yet the memory of Marcus Aurelius endured as a symbol of the philosopher king. My life illustrated the possibility of combining military command with deep intellectual pursuit. The historical record preserves my image as a ruler who sought wisdom above all else. The quiet light of a Roman villa in the 2nd century fell softly across the polished marble floor. A single oil lamp burned with a steady flame, casting long shadows against the white walls. The room was furnished with simple wooden tables and comfortable cushions arranged for rest. A small statue of a philosopher stood on a pedestal near the window, gazing out at the garden. The air smelled faintly of olive oil and dried lavender that hung in bunches from the rafters. A woven rug covered the stone floor, softening the sound of footsteps that rarely disturbed the silence. The air smelled faintly of beeswax and dried lavender, a scent that lingered in the corners of the room. Outside, the garden was still, with cypress trees standing as silent sentinels against the twilight sky. The fountain in the courtyard trickled softly, its sound a constant and soothing presence in the quiet house. This space offered a refuge from the demands of state and the burdens of leadership. It was a place where the emperor could rest his mind and reflect on the lessons of his teachers. The stillness of the room mirrored the inner peace that I sought to cultivate through my philosophy. The legacy of these relationships defined the character of the Antonine Age. The adoption by Antoninus Pius provided the foundation for a reign marked by wisdom and duty. The collaboration with Lucius Verus demonstrated the capacity for forgiveness and shared responsibility. The mentorship of Fronto and the Stoic philosophers shaped the moral compass of the emperor. Even the conflicts with Balamar and Ariogassus highlighted the challenges of maintaining peace in a turbulent world. The succession of Commodus signaled the end of an era defined by adoptive succession and philosophical governance. The Meditations remain a lasting record of the thoughts and feelings of a man who navigated these relationships with grace. The denarius from 140 AD serves as a tangible reminder of the unity between Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius. The College of Antonine Priests ensured that the memory of Lucius Verus endured beyond his death. The plague outbreaks during the reigns of Marcus and Commodus tested the resilience of the empire. Yet the bonds formed through adoption, friendship, and mentorship left an indelible mark on history. The story of Marcus Aurelius is one of connection and continuity in a world of constant change. My life was a testament to the power of relationships to shape the course of events. The quiet villa stood as a symbol of the peace I sought to preserve for the Roman people. The flickering lamp and the soft sound of the fountain remained long after the emperor had gone. The end of my rule was the beginning of a long decline, yet my personal philosophy survived. The bronze horse and rider stands as a reminder of what was lost and what could have been. The narrative of my life concludes with the quiet acceptance of fate that I preached throughout my reign. The death of Marcus Aurelius marked the end of the prosperous condition of the Roman Empire described by Edward Gibbon in his historical works. Historians often view my passing as the closing chapter of a golden age that had flourished under my predecessors. The succession of my son Commodus was considered an unfortunate choice that signaled the beginning of the empire's decline. This transition ended the stable rule that had characterized the reigns of Antoninus Pius and the early years of my own rule. The shared imperial throne with Lucius Verus, which began in 161 AD, had established a model of dual rule that was not repeated. Later scholars noted that the recovery of Rome in the Severan period followed the plague outbreaks and fires during the reigns of Marcus and Commodus. Some academic texts contain no verifiable claims about the specific legal reforms attributed to Marcus Aurelius during my lifetime. Other sources offer no detailed information regarding the broader legacy of the philosopher-emperor in their specific analyses. Certain documents focus entirely on technical specifications or unrelated topics, rather than historical narratives of my impact. Despite these gaps in some modern records, the bronze equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius stands in the Piazza del Campidoglio in Rome. This sculpture remains the only surviving bronze equestrian statue from antiquity and serves as a powerful visual testament to my enduring presence. The statue depicts the emperor on horseback with a calm and commanding expression that has inspired viewers for centuries. Sunlight filters through the ancient columns of the square and illuminates the weathered bronze surface of the statue. The patina of the metal has turned a deep green over the centuries, blending with the warm tones of the surrounding stone architecture. Visitors walk slowly around the base of the monument and observe the intricate details of the horse's musculature and the emperor's draped cloak. The desk stood near the window, scarred by the nibs of many pens and the weight of heavy books. A bronze lamp sat on the corner, its flame flickering softly in the draughtless air. The walls were adorned with modest frescoes depicting scenes of nature and the changing seasons. Outside, the garden offered a view of cypress trees swaying in the breeze, their dark green needles whispering against the sky. The air inside was cool and dry, preserving the ink on the pages and the peace of the scholar's mind. It was in this quiet space that the foundations of my character were laid with care and patience. The boy grew into a young man who was known for his seriousness and his dedication to learning. He did not seek the loud applause of the crowds, but rather the quiet approval of his mentors. My adoption by Antoninus Pius marked the beginning of my formal preparation for the imperial office. The transition from Marcus Annius Verus to the future emperor was a gradual process filled with study and reflection. I learned to balance the demands of public life with the inner life of the mind. The legacy of my early education would sustain me through the many challenges I faced as the ruler of Rome. I succeeded my adoptive father Antoninus Pius as Emperor of Rome in the year 161 CE. This succession fulfilled the intricate plans laid out by Emperor Hadrian many years before. The path from a boy named Verus. The fire has burned low in the tent, leaving only a bed of red embers that pulse with a slow, dying heat. The wind outside carries the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a cold breath against the canvas that does not disturb, only reminds. Here, in the quiet hours before dawn, the weight of the crown feels less like gold and more like a stone worn smooth by the river of time. I listen to the breathing of the camp, a rhythmic tide that mirrors the pulse within my own chest. There is no need for words in this stillness, only the acknowledgement of the present moment. The simple fact of being alive while the world sleeps. The silence is not empty. It is full of the unspoken thoughts that guide a life. I am not the emperor in this moment, but a man seeking the center of his own soul, finding peace in the shadow of the legionaries who rest around me. My journey through the long years of rule has brought me to this final camp, where the cold air bites at the skin, and the stars look down with ancient indifference. The body grows heavy, and the mind turns inward to review the path walked, not with regret, but with a quiet acceptance of the natural order. The years of campaigning in the north have left their mark on the bones, a dull ache that speaks of miles traveled and battles endured. The Marcomannic Wars tested the strength of the legions and the resolve of the empire, pushing supply lines across the frozen landscape of the Danube. Each soldier required a vast amount of grain and meat to sustain their exertion, a daily demand that shaped the very arteries of trade and transport. The administrative burden of feeding an army in the field was a constant struggle, yet it was a duty that had to be met with precision and care. The plague that swept through the ranks and the cities was a shadow that fell over the land, taking many lives and leaving a silence in its wake. It was a time of great loss, but also of great endurance, as the empire held together against the tides of disease and war. The internal governance remained focused on justice and order, even as the external threats grew more severe. The fire of the capital city would come later, after my time had passed. But the fragility of stone and wood was always present. The transition of power to my son was a decision made with the hope that wisdom could be inherited. Yet the world knows that such gifts often fade with the bloodline. The choice of Commodus as heir remains a poignant reminder of how easily stability can slip through fingers that are no longer steady. The era of the 5 good emperors drew to a close with my passing, marking the end of a golden age defined by reason and the beginning of a time of ambition and turmoil. The empire would continue to exist, but the light of my philosophy dimmed with the setting of my son. The history of Rome would never be the same after the departure of the philosopher king, for the balance had shifted. The quiet strength of my character remains a subject of study for those who seek to understand the nature of power and virtue. The final chapter of my life was written in the camps and the quiet moments of reflection. far from the marble halls of the city. The end of my rule was the beginning of a long decline. Yet my personal philosophy survived in the pages of my journals. These writings, later known as meditations, reflect on the nature of duty, the transience of life, and the unity of all humanity. They were not written for the public eye, but for the private soul, a dialogue between the self and the cosmos. The legacy of my reign is found in these words and in the silence of the statue that stands in Rome. The empire would struggle to find a leader of such caliber again for many generations. As the winds of change swept through the centuries, the story of my late life is one of duty fulfilled and wisdom preserved against the tides of time. The bronze figure in the square remains a symbol of the philosopher who ruled an empire with a quiet heart, a guardian of a bygone era. The end of my life was not a defeat, but a transition, passing the torch to a less worthy hand, as is the way of all things. The narrative of my life concludes with the quiet acceptance of fate that I preached throughout my reign, knowing that death is a natural part of the cycle. The end of my rule was the beginning of a long decline. Yet my personal philosophy survived the fall of the dynasty. The bronze horse and rider stand as a testament to the possibility of combining military command with deep intellectual pursuit. The historical record preserves the image of a ruler who sought wisdom above all else, a light in the darkness of political strife. The quiet light of a Roman villa in the 2nd century fell softly across the polished marble floor, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. A single oil lamp burned with a steady flame, casting long shadows against the white walls that seemed to hold the warmth of the day. The room was furnished with simple wooden tables and comfortable cushions arranged for rest, inviting a moment of stillness amidst the chaos of the world. A small statue of a philosopher stood on a pedestal near the window, gazing out at the garden where the olive trees swayed in the breeze. The air smelled faintly of olive oil and dried lavender that hung in bunches from the rafters, a scent that brought memories of home and peace. The silence of the room was a sanctuary, a place where the mind could wander, free from the burdens of the throne. This quiet space was where the thoughts were formed, where the questions were asked and answered in the stillness of the night. The walls seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the house, a living entity that witnessed the passage of time. The floor was cool to the touch, a reminder of the earth beneath the stone, grounding the spirit in the physical world. The lamp flickered occasionally, a small dance of light and shadow that mirrored the fleeting nature of life itself. The bronze statue in the Piazza del Campidoglio stands as the only surviving equestrian sculpture from antiquity, a miracle of preservation. Sunlight filters through the ancient columns of the square and illuminates the weathered bronze surface, revealing the deep green patina that has formed over the centuries. This verdigris blends with the warm tones of the surrounding stone architecture, creating a harmony of color that speaks of age and endurance. Visitors walk slowly around the base of the monument and observe the intricate details of the horse's musculature and the emperor's draped cloak. The figure of the horse raises one foreleg in a gesture of controlled movement that suggests both power and restraint, a frozen moment of action. Shadows lengthen across the cobblestones as the afternoon light softens and creates a quiet atmosphere in the heart of the city. The silence of the square allows the viewer to contemplate the weight of history that rests upon this singular surviving artifact. The statue survived the fall of the Roman Empire and the destruction of many other monuments throughout the ages, standing as a silent witness to the rise and fall of nations. It was mistakenly believed for a long time to depict Constantine the Great, which helped preserve it from melting down from metal in times of need. This misidentification allowed the image of Marcus Aurelius to endure when other representations of him might have been lost forever to the fires of history. The legacy of my written thoughts continued to influence Western philosophy long after my death, providing a unique window into the mind of a ruler who sought to live according to reason and virtue. Modern readers find comfort in my reflections on duty, mortality, and the nature of the universe, finding solace in the silence that followed the final page of the journal was not an end, but a quiet beginning for a voice that had spoken only to the self. My thoughts, written in the cold camps of the north and in the dim corners of the imperial palace, were meant to be a private map for a wary traveler, never intended for the eyes of strangers. I wrote in Greek, the language of philosophy, so that even the language itself would close the door behind me. Yet a soldier's papers do not stay private when the soldier is also an emperor. The notebooks passed through the hands of stewards and scribes, then into the libraries of those who had loved me, and at last into a wider circle that I could not have predicted. Galen, the physician who had sat by my bedside through the long nights of the plague, had spoken of my discipline of mind with quiet admiration to other learned men of his age. He carried fragments of my reasoning into his own writings on the soul, on the body, on the necessary endurance of the philosopher who serves a state. Through his words, the shape of my thinking began to outlive my body, and a path was opened for the journal to follow. The book that scholars would later call the Meditations was not a book at all in my own time, but a loose bundle of notebooks, the entries undated, the order uncertain, across the centuries that followed. It slipped in and out of view like a star behind cloud, A Byzantine reader copied it in the 10th century. A Renaissance editor brought it back into print in 1559. A monk added marginal notes in a quiet European library, and a translator gave it a French voice, then an English voice, then 100 others. With each reader, the journal lost a little of its original weight and gained something new, the weight of company. The man who wrote in solitude was now read by readers who were also alone, each holding the same sentence in a different country, in a different century, in a different sorrow. The succession I had arranged failed in the way I had feared most. Commodus, the son I had raised in the imperial household, did not carry the duties of office as I had taught him. He turned the gravity of the throne into a public spectacle, dressing as a gladiator, mistaking applause for legitimacy. The Senate, which had endured my long meditations on the dignity of office, watched his reign unravel into excess and cruelty. He was strangled in his bath in the year of his 32nd winter, and the Nerva Antonine line ended with him. Historians who came after wrote of this passage as the closing of a golden century, the moment when the philosopher, King Tradition, broke and the empire began its long, uneven descent. My own face on the silver denarius, struck during the years of joint rule with Antoninus Pius, became a coin that collectors and citizens alike would later turn over in their palms as if to read a different ending in the metal. There was no different ending. The line ended where it ended, but the journal did not. The bronze equestrian statue stands now in a square in the city that was once mine. Its surface holds a deep green patina that has formed over many centuries of rain and sun, the patina of survival itself. Visitors walk slowly around the base of the monument and observe the controlled gesture of the horses raised forelig, the draped cloak, the open hand that does not grip a weapon. For a long time the sculpture was mistakenly believed to depict Constantine the Great, and that error preserved it from being melted down for its metal during the centuries when other imperial bronzes were lost. The mistake protected the truth. The figure has now been moved to a museum to spare it from the slow corrosion of weather, and a copy stands in its place under the open sky. Travelers come from distant countries and stand for a long time in front of either version, the original or the replica, and they do not always know which is which. The silence around the statue is the silence of a long, finished conversation that still has listeners. The journal has its own quiet life, apart from the bronze and the coin. It rests now on the shelves of libraries and on the bedside, tables of readers who have never set foot in any imperial city. A young person in a small apartment opens the book at random in the late evening and reads a sentence about how to begin the day with patience. A doctor in a hospital corridor remembers a paragraph about the body's frailty, and takes a slower breath before entering the next room. A philosopher in a university lecture writes a fragment of my reasoning on a board for students who will copy it into their notebooks and forget it and remember it again years later in a difficult month. The lines that I wrote to discipline my own mind have become a discipline shared by strangers across an ocean of time. They are no longer mine. They were never quite mine, even when I held the stylus. In the chapel of a quiet monastery, a single oil lamp casts a slow, trembling light over a parchment page where a copyist works through the long hours before dawn. He does not know my name in the way I knew it. He knows only that the words must be preserved, that the patience required to copy them is itself a form of agreement with what they say. The room smells of beeswax and ink and damp stone. A bell sounds outside in the cold air, marking the passage of an hour that will not return. The copyist sets down his quill and rests his eyes for a moment, and in that pause the words on the